I want you to know that a couple of weeks ago, this minister died, and while this minister died, so did an Uber driver, and they both went up to heaven at the same time, and they're there, and they're talking to St. Peter, and St. Peter says, "Hey, would you like me to show you your new residences?" And they said, "Yes." So first of all, they came to this mansion here, and the Uber driver gets told that this mansion is his. It's got 2 or 3 stories, it's got gold-plated things, it's got an Olympic-sized swimming pool, it's got a library, billiard room, it's got its own bowling alley. Absolutely fantastic. They take about 25, 30 more steps, and they come up to this little shack. It's like 4 by 6. Doesn't even have windows. There's no yard or anything. And the minister says to St. Peter, he says, "Hey," he says, "what's the deal here?" St. Peter says, "It's simple." He said, "When you preached on Easter Sunday, everybody fell asleep. Every time the Uber driver drove, everyone was drove to prayer." I'll try to be an Uber driver today, okay? You know, Easter's such a great time. And it's such a great time because there's this simple reason why we know we're here. Really, it's pretty simple. You know that Easter Sunday, besides Mother's Day, are the 2 highest attended Sundays of the year? How many guys knew that? Okay. The 3rd is Christmas. Well, the reason why Easter is such an incredible thought is because there's this idea of there's this extra reason going on. You see, if you back up and you take a look on Thursday night, there was torment. There were 3 trials. Jesus was up all night long. He simply was absolutely exhausted. And then on Friday, he goes through all this physical torment, this physical torture, belittling, agony. And then Saturday comes and it's like this. That's Saturday. And then Sunday morning comes and they celebrate the resurrection of the dead. They celebrate Jesus who died instead of you and instead of me. We celebrate his resurrection. The journey of this is quite amazing. And I want you to know that Pastor Fred did a great job of giving us an overview of Peter's life, because this morning, I would like each of us to understand a little bit more about Peter's journey. How did he benefit? Before I read a passage, I just want to share something with you. I'm the youngest of 3. I'm the youngest of 4 in my family. And I have a brother who's 2 years older than I am, and I have another brother who's 12 years older than I am, and a sister who's 13 years older than I am. And those guys, I learned from their mistakes. I benefited and didn't have to make those same mistakes that they made. How many of you guys are like, "Yeah, I'm thankful for older brother and sister too," okay? All right, see those hands. How many of you are like, you are the older brother or sister and they learned from you? Can you understand? You can relate to this? Well, here's the deal. Peter, I can learn from Peter and I don't have to experience it myself. But here's the truth. As we take a look at a passage this morning, there's some people who will never accept truth because, quite frankly, they want their own. There's some people who will never accept the truth and never live by the truth because they want their own. No matter how you look at it, it's a banana. You can put any title on it you want, but it is still a banana. And when you open it up, it's still a banana. And when you eat it, it tastes like a good job. Or as Mozart would say, banana. John chapter 20. John chapter 20 gives us a little understanding there. Early on the first day of the week, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene went to the tomb and saw that the stone had been removed from the entrance. So she came running to Peter and the other disciple, the one who Jesus loved, and said, "They have taken the Lord out of the tomb, and we don't know where they have put him." So Peter and the other disciple started for the tomb. Both were running, but the other disciple outran Peter and reached the tomb first. He bent over and looked in at the strips of lying cloth there, but he did not go in. Then Simon Peter, who was behind him, arrived and went into the tomb. He saw the strips of linen laying there, as well as the burial cloth that had been around Jesus' head. The cloth was folded up by itself, separate from the linen. Finally, the other disciple who had reached the tomb first also went inside. He saw and believed. Oftentimes, we can learn from other people. I'd like us to take a little journey with Jesus, Peter's journey with Jesus. You know, there's highlights and lowlights of his life that just absolutely impress me. Think about this. He was a tough guy. I mean, he fished at night on a sea that where it was located, the winds just came up and made torment on the water. He walked on water once. Oh, I wish I was him. He once cut an ear of a soldier off and then watched Jesus put the ear back on. I wish I was there. Oh, that would have been exciting. You know, he was a man of action. He was a bold man who once said to Jesus, I will never deny you. But then he did 3 times. He was like the other disciples on that Saturday, though, and he was aimless, without direction. And when Jesus died, he learned from a woman. Ladies, I mean this in all sincerity. A man like Peter does not listen to women. But he listened. And he acted. And he ran. And he ran. And he ran. And as a result of that, he ended up speaking boldly to thousands of people. Something changed. Something went from denial to acceptance and proclamation. You see, he was bold, but he once denied knowing Jesus. He spoke the words, I will never deny you, and then the rooster crowed. You see, Peter denied, and in the denial, the amazing part to me is that he denied to a little girl. That's the one that amazes me the most. But I guess I'd like to pause here for a second and talk about denial for a second and ask you the question, why do people deny? Why do people deny? Quite frankly, it's because we're confused emotionally for a moment. We're overwhelmed emotionally for a moment. And when we deny, it's like the information is not clicking on our head, and we can't speak with clarity, and we can't think with clarity, and we can't put it all together. It's like, and we just freeze. You ever had your mom look at you and you ever had the principal look at you? You ever had your dad look at you? You see, Peter was already overwhelmed with what was happening in the last 24 hours. Some of his dreams were ending as he was watching Jesus be tortured. What he had known these 3 previous years was coming to an end. He was protecting himself, and here's the truth. We don't like denying, but denying protects us for a little bit of time, doesn't it? Doesn't denying protect us for a little? It buys us a moment. So I guess another question is this: how real is denial? How real is denial? You know, sometimes there's historical facts. Sometimes there is scientific evidence for something. And we believe it. The probability is overwhelming. That's what they're looking for in a courtroom. They're looking for beyond a reasonable doubt. What does it take to get us from denial to acceptance? Beyond a reasonable doubt. You see, denial is when we refuse to accept something that is true. Denial is a way of protecting ourselves. Sometimes it's short term. And a short term denial might be, no, I didn't do that. A longer term denial might be, finances are adding up. Another long term denial might be an illness is creeping up on us. Another long term denial is relational stress. But you know, there's a time when denial can be good. You ever thought about that? Denial is a good thing when somebody's lying. It's a good thing. Denial is when we stand up for the truth, but denial is also when we disengage ourselves from the truth. It's a matter of the way the word is used in the sentence. Peter denied. You know, denial can be harmful. I was on a cruise ship once, and back in those days, at the end of the cruise ship, you paid your bill. Okay, now they take your credit information in the beginning, but you went to that. And there's a guy in front of me. This is a true story. I'm not kidding you. And he's standing in front of me, and he's getting ready to pay his bill, and he says, I need my bill for my room, and they gave it to him. And he goes, $8,000. He goes, there's no way this is true. Can I see the whole printout? And they went and got multiple pages for this guy. I'm like, hurry up, dude, just pay the bill, get out of here. Dude, you're a liar. I don't want to stand here. $8,000. He goes, sir, just tell me which one of these things aren't yours. And he starts to look and he goes, my wife. My wife. She's going to kill me for charging all these things. What was denial, what you guys thought was a pushing of the blame, he finally accepted, and he paid the $8,000 bill, and then I went and paid my $80. You see, denial is that idea of when something finally catches up with us. There can be harm there. Sometimes we realize that we're at denial and acceptance is over there, and there's this other thing that's kind of in the middle. There's two things that are in the middle of denial to acceptance. Sometimes it's doubt. You ever been in doubt? Maybe might be. I just don't know. And then there's that state of polite. There's many people that are in a state of polite. They just don't say anything. They just never admit what they believe about it. They just. What do you think about masks? How's your day? How about them Giants, huh? Well, that's not denial. That's avoidance. But then there's this acceptance thing, and I'd like you to look at these words, okay? Because they're denial. That's when we say no way. And doubt says maybe. Polite is in that same area. But then there's acceptance. And when that acceptance happens, there's confession that takes place. There's professing that takes place. One of the greatest problems in today's society is the idea of, but where does the source come from to help us move on? What is it that causes us to move from denial to acceptance? It's probably better information. Do you know the National Enquirer is a great source? If you're a teacher or a student, maybe you've seen somebody use the term Wikipedia for the most reliable source on the internet. I want you to know I taught school for 11 years. And finally, after about the third year, I was finally letting students use the internet if they wanted to for some of their sources. But in order to use the internet for a source, they had to put the internet source on a separate piece of paper and give me reasons for this being a reliable source. Hey, where's this from? Who is this person? What does he stand for? What is this company all about? Mr. Hathorne, that's a whole lot of work. I said, yeah, but you get to copy and paste the information to your paper. You don't have to type. I said, all I'm asking for is to prove it. Well, what are those dream students? You know, the one who goes home and starts the paper that day instead of the night before it's due? Any of you guys out there? You're the dream student, okay? I'm the other end, okay? This girl comes the next day and says, Mr. Hathorne, do you know that Wikipedia is not really that? Do you know that you can change the information on Wikipedia yourself and it's not necessarily true? I said, really? I said, tell me a little bit more. She says, well, I was going to use this other source on the internet last night for my paper, but I realized that what they stood for, and I realized that the owner's the guy who owns such and such a business, and he has an agenda. And I'm thinking, this is a ninth grader using the word agenda? I'm thinking, man, she is pretty smart. Probably my daughter. No, and she starts to talk about, she goes, Mr. Hathorn, you can't trust every internet source. And I said, well, if we didn't accomplish anything else this year, this is probably pretty fabulous for a 9th grader to realize this. Then the last thing that she said was, Mr. Hathorn, this person said this, but these other 3 people said this. And when I started to realize that these people were experts and this was just an opinion, and then she said these words, Mr. Hathorn, do you think the internet's sort of like just a giant Facebook? I said, maybe. How reliable are the sources? Let's jump back to Peter here. Peter gets restored. Probably the most famous line in all of Peter's interaction here is this phrase, go and tell the disciples and Peter. He's probably had a rough 48 to 50 hours. He's lived in shame. He's lived in quietness. He's lived in regret about the fact that he denied Jesus, and Jesus uses the phrase to these women, go tell the disciples, but make sure you tell my friend Peter, because he's been having a rough couple of days and he probably needs to know that I think he's okay and I think he's okay and I understand more than he understands. You have to read that in the text, okay? It's in the footnotes in the bottom, okay? I found it on Wikipedia. But go tell Peter, and what does he do? He runs. Now, Peter's not a track star. If they were giving out medals, he would have got the silver and the other guy would have got the gold because he came in second. But if they gave a medal for bravery of going into the tomb, he would get the gold and the other guy would get a bronze because he stayed outside. And he goes inside and he checks things out. What is he doing? He's raising the information. He's increasing his experience. He's using a better source. Is the tomb the greatest source of whether or not it's empty? That's a good time to say yes. Is the empty tomb a great source for resurrection? It is. And that's what takes place is his actions cause him to have a change of heart. In the midst of all of this, a little bit later, Jesus has this fish fry. And they're barbecuing some fish, and they're having some fish there. And Jesus says to Peter, he says, do you love me? Man, he's giving him a chance to move from denial to profession. He gives him a chance right there. And he says, yes, I love you. Then he gave him a chance to remove the second denial. He says, Peter, do you love me a second time? He's like, need to go see a hearing doctor or what? Say, yeah, yes, I do. And then he asks him a third time, and he says, Peter, do you love me? And he says, yes, I do. And then he says, feed my sheep. And you know what happens? He moves from denial to profession, to confession, to proclamation. He fulfills his name. His name is Cephas. His name is Rock. The name Rock actually means this in most parts of the world. It is a term for the pier that's in the deepest part of the ocean that's holding the pier up, that's down in the solid part of the ocean that's making the pier solid. That's a Cephas. He says, you go be a Cephas. And you know what? Teach people about my grace. Teach people what you've experienced. Teach people that there's victory over death. Teach people that you denied, but now you have hope. Teach people that you were lost, but now you've been found. Teach people that you lied and disowned me, but my grace is sufficient for you and it's sufficient for everybody else. You see, grace is making the story about Jesus, not about Peter. The story of the resurrection is not about Peter. The story of the resurrection is about Jesus raising from the dead. But we take a look at Peter because that was his journey to the point of saying, it's all about what Jesus did. You see, he changes from denial to proclamation. In Acts chapter 2, he speaks the very first time 3,000 people become believers. In Acts chapter 3, he heals a man outside the temple, and then he addresses the crowd and people become believers. In Acts chapter 4, he preaches before the priest, the temple guard, and some of the Sadducees. In Acts chapter 9, he heals a man named Annas and a little girl named Tabitha, and then he proclaims the word of truth. And in Acts chapter 10, he preaches to the soldiers under the guard of Cornelius, and he simply preaches, and he preaches. What happened? He went from denial to acceptance, to profession. What happened? He saw the empty tomb. What happened? He knew he'd been forgiven. I'd like you to know that I have problems just like Peter. My greatest exercises in life have been running at the mouth, okay, skipping pages of reading, and lifting money from my mom's purse. Those are the three most big exercises of my life. In school, I struggled to keep my eyes on my own paper. Oh, I did. As a little boy, I struggled to have my place in line. I just thought I ought to be wherever I wanted to be, and I would crowd kids in line all the time. I'd lie to my mom. Probably the greatest sad moment of my life is that about 10 years old, my brother came home from the service, and I brought he had some Marlboro cigarettes, and I thought he was pretty cool, so I took his Marlboro cigarettes, and I went up in the second story of our house to my bedroom, and I lit that baby up. I was cool. 10 years old, second story, behind closed doors. I was cool to myself. I took a puff, coughed, almost threw up. It wasn't a great sight. Heard my dad walking up the stairs, so I took that lit cigarette, and I stuck it inside of one of those cotton moccasins that are like, you know the kind that you wear in the morning in the winter and they're cold, and well, let's just say that's where it was. And let's just say that my dad walked in, and here's the truth. John, you smoking? And I told him exactly what you would have said. No. And he said, John, it smells like smoke in here. And I said, doesn't to me. He said, John, he goes, what's that little fire in the closet right there? To which I said exactly what you would. What fire? The truth is, I was denying. And you know what? If Peter had a name tag on today, Peter's name tag would say forgiven. And if I have a name tag on, it should say forgiven as well. Because God's grace was sufficient for Peter, and it's sufficient for you and I. I'd like to share two little verses with you as we close, because I don't want you to leave here without hope. The first one is from John 1:12, where he says this, yet to all who received him, to those who believe in his name, he gave the right to become children of God. The other is from Romans 10, verse 9, where it says, if you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord, and you believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. The only hope I have, it's not Wikipedia. It's not. And it's not some lousy source on the internet. It is the hope that Jesus Christ died for me. Let's close in prayer here.